Your basic philosophy is that life has meaning under all conditions, but how easy is it when there's a sense of hopelessness, a sense of despair, to recognize this meaning?
Let me confront you with a somewhat strange definition of despair. As I'm used to proclaiming is that despair can be explained in terms of a mathematical equation. D, capital D, equals S minus M. What does it mean? Despair is suffering without meaning. As long as an individual cannot see any meaning in his or her despair, he or she will certainly be prone to, in its suffering, I wanted to say, no meaning in the suffering. He or she will certainly be prone to despair and, under certain conditions, to suicide. But at the moment they can see a meaning in their suffering, they can mold it into an achievement, they can mold their predicament into an accomplishment on the human level. They can turn their tragedies into a personal triumph. But they must know for what. What should I do with it? But if people, like so many segments of present-day society and population, cannot find any meaning whatsoever in their lives, cannot see anything meaningful, they more often than not have something to live by.
Uncle, give me an example of meaning that can be taken out of a situation of despair.
I once received a letter from a young Texan student who told me his own story. At the age of 17 years, he had an accident when indulging to his diving sport. And from that time on, he was paralyzed from the neck down. And he wrote to me, I broke my neck, but it did not break me. I am at present helpless, and this handicap will remain with myself apparently forever. But I have not given up my studies. I went, because of my own helplessness, to help other people. I want to become a psychologist, to help others. And I'm sure, he wrote to me, that my suffering will add an essential contribution to my ability to understand others and to help other people. This man, three years later, was invited by me to deliver a lecture, to read a paper at the 3rd World Congress of Logotherapy taking place at the University of Regensburg in West Germany. He was brought in and with his wheelchair by a plane from Texas to West Germany and delivered a lecture under the title, The Defiant Power of the Human Spirit. The last sentence read, I know that this is true because that man was me. For a quarter of a century, I had the honor to be the director of a neurological department at a general hospital. And believe me, throughout that time, I had ample opportunities to watch and witness how young people could master their fate young girls, for instance, that had danced a weekend before in a disco, then were paralyzed due to a brain tumor or a tumor of the spinal cord, a neoplasm of the spinal cord. Or how young men who the last weekend still were skiing in the Austrian Alps or driving their Yamaha motorcycle, could no longer move a leg. And I've seen people who were amputated. All 4 extremities had to be taken away due a certain case, what I have in mind, due a high voltage electric accident. And I know that one told his former nurse from the hospital, he wrote to her a letter, before this terrible accident, I was bored and always drunk. And since my accident, I know what it means to be happy, imagine, with no extremities. I know what it means to be happy. His life had become full of happiness again, simply because as long as you are pursuing happiness, as the phrase reads, as long as you are aiming at happiness, you cannot obtain it. The more you make it a target, the more you miss the aim and you miss the target. This is most conspicuous in cases of sexual neurosis, where exactly those people, male patients, who are striving to demonstrate their potency, they fall prey to impotence. The more a female patient tries to show to herself at least how much she is capable of experiencing a full female orgasm, the more she's doomed to frigidity. But at the moment, you do not think of pleasure or happiness, but just you give yourself, be it in sexual activities, be it in work, be it in love, at that moment that you are no longer concerned with becoming a happy or a successful man or a woman. At that moment, happiness installs itself by itself.
But Dr. Frankl, tell me, how could the people in the death camp at Auschwitz, and you were there yourself, what meaning could they take out of an absolutely hopeless situation? They knew they were going to die.
What I can say about the lesson I took home from Auschwitz and Dachau and so forth, let me prefer to speak in a more personally detached way by referring to the absolutely parallel experiences that people had in prisoner war camps. The literature, psychiatric literature in the field of psychiatry of POW camps shows, independently from each other, that psychiatrists found out that those inmates or prisoners were most likely to survive the camp period. Those, I say, who were orientated toward a future, orientated toward becoming free again in the future, and most importantly, oriented to a meaning that they had to fulfill in the future, a task that they had to complete in the future, and or to be reunited with their beloved people in the future again. Let me just recount an incident that happened to me in one of my own concentration camps. I was confronted within a couple of days with 2 people, 2 comrades, the one of whom I knew that they are prone to suicide. Now what happened? I asked both why they wished to commit suicide, to take their lives, and without knowing, independently from one another, they told me, see doctor, I've nothing to expect from my life anymore. And you know what I improvisingly asked them? Now listen, isn't it conceivable that instead life expects something from you? And then it turned out that one of them was expected by his own daughter, whom he loved about all, above all, in the United States, she had already succeeded in emigrating. And the other, then Frankl told me and confessed that there was a series of books that he had written and or edited in the field of geography, it was, as far as I remember, and he wanted to complete this series of books.